Hello and welcome. This is sandrashart at Life Over 60. Today I am very honored because MaryEllen After 60 has invited me to do a collaboration with her. And as you know, I really love MaryEllen and I like her channel. As a matter of fact, her channel was one of the very first channels that I ever found in the beauty community. And actually, I was looking for something else on YouTube. I was Googling or looking for a procedure that I had done, and I was trying to find some information on it. And sure enough, MaryEllen After 60 popped up. Well, I watched her first video and she had me hooked at hello. So I really, ever since then, have been such a wonderful fan of MaryEllen. So I am quite honored that she has asked me to do this collab together. We're going to be talking about 5 things about us that may surprise you. So I'm going to tell you about 5 things that maybe you don't know about me. And you know, it really has been very hard to find that because I have written several memoirs about myself. So my life has been out there for a long time. I probably am one of the most transparent creators that there would be because I have already written memoirs about my life. But I think probably after thinking about it, I have been able to think of 5 things that quite possibly you don't know about me. So let's get started. The very first one is that even though I have spent most of my adult life in front of the camera and in the public and doing speaking engagements, actually I am quite shy and I tend to be a loner. My daughters tell me that if I'm not careful, I could be a recluse. Because I think I am happy with myself, and I think many creative people do suffer from the ability to be happy all alone. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I can remember when I was in high school, I loved to sew. And that's a creative thing, but I love to sew. I would make all of my full skirts. Remember when, well, maybe you don't remember, but anyway, when I was in the mid-50s, we wore full skirts with tops, blouses, and under those skirts we wore crinolines. Believe it or not, we would wear our crinolines to high school with our full skirts. So I would spend the winter making my full skirts, summer full skirts to wear under my crinolines so that when May 1st came, we all went to school wearing our summer outfits. So I always made my skirts for school, and then when I got married, I made all of my children's clothes. I made draperies. I made everything because I just absolutely loved to sew. And later on, in my adult life, almost every formal outfit, every gown that I wore to any special occasion, I made myself. I don't do much sewing anymore, but I recently went on Amazon and I ordered a pattern for just a very simple long maxi dress. So let's see if I have the energy to get out my little portable sewing machine and start sewing again, because I really did always love to sew. So when you are creative, I think you, maybe not everyone is like me, but being creative, I'm just happy to entertain myself by myself. That's why my husband is very good for me, because he's a social butterfly. He's outgoing, and when I met him, he was always going to parties, and he was just a fun guy. And I'm kind of quiet and shy, so it was a good mix. He's a Scorpio and I'm a Capricorn, so I plod along, slowly climbing the mountain, and he's out there on fire all the time. So it really has been a very good match. The second thing that maybe you don't know about me is that before I was 17 years old, I had saved the lives of 2 children. When I was about maybe 8 years old and living on my grandfather's farm, we used to have what they called swimming holes. They weren't really lakes, they were just areas, I think, where they did strip mining and the water and the rainwater filled up. And it's where all us children would go to play in the summer, and that's where we would go to swim. My father taught me to swim at a very, very young age, so I was an excellent swimmer. And I remember going to the swimming hole with maybe 4 or 5 friends, and we were playing and having such a great time. And all of a sudden I looked around and I couldn't see my friend Hannah, who had been swimming right next to me. And I panicked, so I dived under the water, and all of a sudden I could see these braids. She had long braids, long thin braids. I could see these braids floating down in the water just like snakes or ropes. And so I dove down and I grabbed her braids. And she was 12 years old and much bigger than I was, but the water made her very light. And I pulled her up out of the water. And I really can't remember if someone helped me get her out of the water. I really have blanked that out of my mind. But I just remember I got her just in time, and we got her out of the water to the shore, and I saved her life. And I was a lifeguard later on in high school. In my sophomore and junior year, I was a lifeguard at our local country club. We didn't belong, but I was a person that was hired to be a lifeguard. And one day, as the beautiful women were sitting and tanning themselves and socializing, a little toddler that belonged to one of the ladies fell in the water. And so I jumped off of my high stand into the water, and I saved that little baby. And the ironic thing is that now, through another friend that I went to high school with, I have found that little baby, who is now a grown woman, and I have spoken to her through Facebook. So that is an interesting thing, I think, to me, about my life. The third thing is that I have had dinner with the president. During my career years, I had 2 syndicated television shows. One was called Wall Street Profile. It dealt with economics and new issue companies coming out. And the other was The Money Show, which was an investment show. I had put together a huge event at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. Now, the Greenbrier is really a beautiful, beautiful hotel tucked in the rolling hills of West Virginia. It's really beautiful. So I bravely sent out an invitation to President Gerald Ford and asked him to join us, and would he please speak to us about the current state of the economy. And he sent a letter right back, and he said, sure, he would love to come. I mean, I don't think anybody turns down an invitation to go to the Greenbrier. He came to the Greenbrier, and I had my son with me, and my mother and my father. And we had a lovely day. He arrived early with his whole group of Secret Service men. He arrived very early, and we spent the day, and of course he retired before dinner, and then we both came together and had a wonderful dinner, sat together, and he gave us a great presentation. He just is a delightful, delightful man. I had such a good time. The Secret Service loved my son, and they made him a junior Secret Service agent and gave him a pin and sent him a certificate later on saying that he was a junior Secret Service agent. But I have a funny little story very quickly about that. While we were sitting having dinner, we were almost finished, and the Secret Service came to me and whispered in my ear, Mr. President, Gerald Ford has to leave now. They had a helicopter, I think, waiting for him outside. And so I turned to President Ford and I said, well, the Secret Service just whispered to me in my ear that they think that because of your schedule, you will have to leave. And he looked at me and he smiled. And very presidential, and I felt the power of a president right at this moment when he said, Sandra, I'm at the Greenbrier. I haven't had my dessert. And I'm the president, and I'll tell them when I'm going to leave. So that was kind of awesome. And then you really realize that the men who hold the power of the president are not weak men. They're very strong and have to make decisions on their own. All right, now the fourth thing that I want to talk about, I've never shared with anybody in the whole wide world. My children, of course, know, but this is something that I've never put out there, and I'm a little hesitant to do it. But after my husband passed away, I raised my children for about 8 years by myself. So I did have time to go out with people and to date other people during that time. And I dated a couple of people that were known. One of them was Barry Farber, and I tried to find a picture here. I probably have one in New York, some pictures of us together, but I couldn't find one down here in Florida, so I apologize for that. But I dated Barry Farber, who ran for mayor one time, but he was a syndicated radio talk show host and was so knowledgeable about language. He always carried a little pad, a notepad in his pocket, and he would pull it out and he would write down ideas and notes. But he spoke many, many languages, was very, very bright, and was really a nice person. And I don't think he ever remarried again. I'm not too sure he had been married before. And the second person, I think you probably all know, he was a baseball player and later on became very famous for his Mr. Coffee commercials, and that was Joe DiMaggio. He was a sweet, quiet man, very, very nice. We once were invited in Florida to Connie Mack Jr.'s country club, and Joe said he didn't want to go because he would rather sit with his blue-collar friends in a bar and talk baseball. So that's exactly who he was. But of course, the person who really stole my heart when he came along in my life was Arthur. So Arthur and I had great chemistry, and that is how that goes. You know, we women, I think, are a little bit different than men. We really have to have chemistry before we fall in love, no matter what career or who the person is. It has to be that right spark, doesn't it? Now, the fifth and last thing, I know some of you may know about my son, but you might be surprised to know that I had a #1 hit song and the most played song in the country in 1997 written about me. And that was a song called If You Could Only See the Way You Love Me. It was written by my son Emerson Hart, and it was on his very first platinum album. But when Emerson was about 20 years old, he went to California and he fell in love with a girl that was 6 years older than he was. And she was really anxious to get married, but you know, I thought he was a little bit too young and he needed to get his career going, and I didn't think engagement okay, but to get married, I thought, well, you know, you really should wait a while. So he wrote a song to me explaining how much he loved her and that I was just wrong, and I was telling him stories that weren't true about relationships. You know how kids are. Anyway, he wrote that song, and it didn't work out with the girls, so mothers are usually right, aren't they, about their kids. And he wrote that song, and it turned out to be the most played song on rock radio in 1997. He won the Billboard Award, and it took his album Lemon Parade, his very first album, multi-platinum all over the world. So I have had a song written about me. So that is kind of nice. Anyway, those are the 5 things that I have never shared with anyone in my whole life. I am just so pleased again and so grateful that MaryEllen has asked me to do this collab with her. I hope that you have a great day, and as I always say, please be good to yourself today. So do something that's just wonderful and makes you feel good. Be kind to the people that you come across today. And of course, as I always say, you know, you've got this great big heart that you've been given. So share that love, because we really need it today in the world. Take care. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you soon.